Hello, I'm Blaze, and welcome back to Warframe. Update 18 is quite possibly the single greatest update in Warframe's history, and I might not really be able to cover it all adequately, but I can at least make a start with Ivara. Let's all see what the new Archer frame has to offer. Acquiring Ivara's part blueprints can be accomplished by completing various spy missions around the star map. Level 1 to 15 spy missions can reward the systems blueprint, level 15 to 25 spy missions can reward the chassis blueprint, and spy missions above level 25 can reward you with the helmet blueprint or the frame blueprint. On the other hand, if grinding out spy missions sounds like too much trouble, you can instead pick her up from the market pre-built with her own Warframe slot and a pre-installed reactor for 325 platinum. We have known for quite some time that Ivara would be based around archery, although she does have a lot of other things going on with a stealth and support focus. Unfortunately, this does come along with her being one of the squishiest frames in the game. She has a base health value of just 75 and the average base shield rating of 100, going up to 225 and 300 at rank 30 respectively. Combined with a base armor value of 65, she really isn't built to take much in the way of direct fire. She does, however, have a sprint speed modifier of 1.15, which is quite fast, and an extremely high base power capacity of 175, going up to 265.5 at rank 30. The only Warframe that has more energy than that is Volt Prime, and she benefits greatly from primed flow thanks to her rather extreme base energy. This can be combined with quick thinking to let her take the occasional incidental hit that would otherwise kill her, but be sure not to rely on it too much, as quick thinking is a safety net, not an excuse for sloppy play. As for mod polarities, she comes along with 1D and 1 dash polarity in her mod slots, and a dash polarity in her aura slot. I consider that to be an ideal aura polarity, thanks to the fact that the radar auras, energy siphon, and corrosive projection are all in that polarity. So that's a nice way to help save Forma when getting her set up for a full complement of mods. Speaking of the radar auras, Ivara comes along with a passive 30-meter enemy radar, giving you advanced warning of the positions of adversaries on your minimap. This stacks with other enemy radar effects as well, so equipping enemy radar auras or animal instinct on your sentinel or Kubro will add to that radius. Quite handy considering how Ivara is one of the game's most fragile frames, so any advanced warning will certainly be beneficial. With that in mind, she is certainly not suited to close range engagement where the enemy could easily shred her in short order. But as it turns out, Ivara has no shortage of tools at her disposal to deal with that little issue. I'm serious, she's so well prepared that she's basically Batman. Ivara's first ability is Quiver and comes along with two different uses. The first is upon tapping the power button. This will not consume any energy, but instead cycles between each of up to 4 different arrow types. These being Cloak, Dash Wire, Noise, and Sleep arrows. Holding the power button down instead will consume 25 energy and actually shoot the selected arrow in the direction of your aim and acts identically to other in-game bows. I would compare their velocity and trajectory to arrows being fired from the Bracta Cernos. Fast and will drop at longer ranges, but in most cases will basically go where you're pointing. Cloak Garrels create a cloak field on the point of impact, rendering any allies inside the bubble invisible to enemies. These will last for 12 seconds, affected by power duration, and have a radius of 2.5 meters affected by power range. You can have a maximum of 3 up at any one time, which cannot be influenced by your mods. These are situationally very useful, giving you or your allies cover whenever you need. I find them especially useful for providing concealment when picking up a downed teammate or activating life support modules. And funnily enough, they will actually attach to anything they hit, including other allies, so you can essentially use Cloak Arrows as an invisibility buff, albeit a relatively short-lived one. Dash Wire arrows are possibly the single coolest Warframe ability ever. After firing them, upon striking the terrain, the arrow will set up an energy-colored zipline that you or any ally can run along. When Ivara is standing on the ground, they will go from the point of impact to her feet, and if she is in the air, it will trace to whatever other terrain is opposite the direction it was fired from. You can have a maximum of 4 ziplines up at any given moment, but amazingly, they have no duration timer. Set them up, and as long as you don't overwrite them with subsequent ziplines, they will stay there for the duration of the mission. You can basically set up a spiderweb to run along far above the enemy heads and rain down death from on high. Or just use them as slides. Either way, they're pretty fantastic. Noise arrows, conversely, are significantly more boring on their own and have very niche uses, but they can be used to set things up if you're doing a stealth mission. They will emit a noise from where they strike, which will cause all unalerted enemies within 20 meters affected by power range to head to that location. This only works on enemies not aware of your presence, but will not itself cause them to go into alert. So you can use this to pull a room of enemies into one nice big target-rich clump for you to demolish. And it has a wide enough effect range that while noise arrows don't do a whole lot on their own, they do what they do well. Although sadly they become completely useless when the shooting starts. More of a tool for the solo player arsenal really. Finally, sleep arrows will put any enemies within 6 meters of the arrow's impact to sleep for 10 seconds. This works very much like Equinox's rest ability. Enemies will be put to sleep until either the duration runs out or they are damaged when below 50% health and maintain whatever awareness state they were in when first put to sleep. Ivara's sleep arrows have a slightly larger effect radius, but lasts for less than half as long. However, Ivara's version does come along with being a projectile rather than a targeted ability, which does let her set the sleep area off on terrain to hit enemies behind corners, for example. Being able to use them freely results in them being quite useful for crowd control and definitely helps take the heat off Ivara and the rest of the team in a fight, particularly if everyone sitting inside a cloak bubble isn't their thing. And being a projectile like her other Quiver arrows does have other uses for her moveset. Sleep arrows' range and duration are both affected by those respective mods. Ivara's second ability is Navigator. This one is honestly more of a gimmick than anything, but it is fun for a while and it does have its uses. Navigator will, upon using it with a projectile weapon, cause Ivara to cloak and assume direct control of the projectile. Any projectile. This can be done either before or after the projectile is in flight. The left and right mouse buttons, or your equivalent controller settings for primary fire and aim, will allow you to set the projectile to either a reduced velocity or standard velocity, and you can freely move it around in flight. Activating the ability is free, but piloting the projectile will drain 3 energy per second depending on the rate of travel, which gets expensive. As an additional bonus, however, controlled projectiles will get an increasing damage multiplier while in flight. 1 per second up to a maximum damage multiplier of 5. I'm not really feeling this ability personally, as the projectile can be somewhat difficult to control and costs a lot of energy, but it does have a number of possibilities. It can control arrows fired through Quiver or from her Artemis Bow, Angstrom and Ogress rockets are turned into camera-guided missiles, and it interacts interestingly with both the Quanta and Mutalist Quanta alternate fire orbs. Especially for the Mutalist Quanta, you can basically use this to give an entire room of enemies a radiation proc so that they fight amongst themselves, but the energy cost is a bit prohibitive. It can also let a number of projectiles, like from the Sonic Ore, Simulors or otherwise, to overcome their usual limited range. Or you can make grenades fly around with a reckless disregard for the forces of gravity. Or you can use it on a glaive and turn Warframe into Dark Sector. It's a fun ability, if nothing else. Energy drain is affected by duration and efficiency mods, the damage multiplier is affected by power strength, and the rate of increasing damage is inversely affected by power duration mods. High duration will make the multiplier grow more slowly, and a reduced duration will make the multiplier climb faster. Ivara's third ability is Prowl and is her version of invisibility, as well as being what I feel is the best designed version of invisibility in the game. The ability can be activated for 25 energy and will drain a base of 1 energy per second. While cloaked, Ivara is limited to a walking speed and her energy will drain at an accelerated rate while moving. Many other actions will break the cloak, but she can roll and jump, run on her dashwire ziplines, aim glide and wall hop while remaining invisible. However, be aware that actions like bullet jumping or even mantling a ledge will break your cloak. So it will pay to be mindful of your surroundings and if you can comfortably make a jump or not. Sprinting or sliding will break the cloak as well, so if you're rolling to move faster, be careful with how long you hold down the button. I have had moments where I accidentally sprint for a split second and ruin my own stealth plan. Additionally, firing a non-silent weapon will temporarily disrupt your cloak, but you can fire a silent weapon freely. While cloaked, Ivara also gains a bonus to her headshots and stealth attacks up to 1.4 times at maximum rank. And on top of that, she gets some roguish elements to her, as remaining within a 4 meter range of an enemy will cast a light on them and 2.5 seconds later will cause them to roll from their drop table once, giving you free ammo, energy and potentially even mods and resources. Perhaps not the most efficient way to farm for things, but it is certainly very cool, and they can still drop things again when they die. Do note, however, that while you can restore energy from dropped energy orbs and through Blight and Entropy Syndicate effects, Team Energy Restores will not work, and the effect of the Energy Siphon aura will be disabled while cloaked. As I have said, I feel like Prowl is invisibility done right. Loki is kind of press a button, watch that timer, be effectively invincible. Prowl, meanwhile, requires you to be careful with how you act, but also provides you with a number of bonuses if you do it right, and I have found it actually to be quite a lot of fun to play with. Prowl's headshot multiplier is affected by power strength, the range for her pickpocketing antics is affected by power range, and an increase in duration will reduce the time it takes for her to get to enemies to roll from their potential loot. And at last, Ivara's final ability is Artemis Bow. Pressing the 4th power button will consume 35 energy, and Ivara will equip the titular Artemis Bow. This is her equivalent to Exalted Blade, Hysteria or Primal Fury, but focuses on ranged attacks instead, and drains 15 energy per shot rather than draining energy over time. Artemis Bow benefits from the rifle mods equipped on your primary weapon. Note I specifically say rifle mods. Currently it doesn't look like shotgun mods transfer to Artemis Bow. However, the Artemis Bow does take into effect the Thunderbolt mod. Artemis Bow has a base damage of 160 and when shot will loose a fan of arrows, the orientation of which actually depends on how much the bow is charged. The fan orientation begins vertically and then rotates clockwise until the fan of arrows is oriented horizontally at a full charge. An uncharged vertical volley is useful to hit a single enemy or enemies coming down stairs, for example, while a horizontal fan makes a very convenient way to take off an awful lot of heads. This fan of arrows numbers 7 at max rank, which goes up to an average of 13 arrows per shot if your primary weapon has a max rank split chamber equipped. The width of the fan is also affected by the accuracy reduction of heavy caliber, but the arrows will not deviate from their oriented plane of fire and will always remain evenly spaced. Though even with that, heavy caliber will make striking multiple targets at longer range a bit, shall we say, hit or miss. In addition to its capacity for ranged destruction, Artemis Bow also allows you to immediately fire a selected Quiver arrow using the alternate fire button. Quiver will still use its associated energy cost, however. Sadly, while Artemis Bow is a fantastic ability, it does come along with the rather annoying downside of disabling your melee attacks while active. If you want to, for example, switch to your sword to get Life Strike to restore your health, you need to go through the Artemis Bow dismissal and the tenor drawing their melee weapon, which is a noticeable delay. As a result of melee being disabled, it also means that you don't have the option of using quick melee either. Artemis Bow really exemplifies the idea that Ivara is not designed with close range engagements in mind. This isn't necessarily poor design, but it does mean that you should try to keep at safe distance in general. Arrow base damage is affected by power strength, and both the activation cost and per shot cost is affected by power efficiency. Keeping all of that in mind, to me it seems that power efficiency and primed flow are pretty much must-haves on Ivara. A combination of a greatly expanded energy pool and reducing energy consumption to make use of all those interesting abilities she has on her utility belt. Without them, actually making use of Quiver and Artemis Bow will drain your energy reserves at an alarming rate. Same goes for Prowl. Primed continuity will also help offset the duration penalty of fleeting expertise. I personally prefer to go for a rank 3 fleeting expertise. This, combined with Streamline, gives a 170% power efficiency rating. The cap is at 175%, but this is close enough for me, and it removes the extra 10% duration penalty of going from rank 3 to rank 4 on inflating expertise. So this is where my preference lies. After that, you have 4 other mod slots to play with. I personally like to add Stretch and Cunning Drift in the Exilus slot to give her Quiver abilities additional range, especially Sleep Arrows thanks to it being useful and cheap crowd control. However, if you don't want that little bit of extra range, using Handspring to reduce the time she is vulnerable after being hit by a knockdown or some other mod of your preference is also perfectly valid. So, following my mod setup, that leaves 3 other slots. It's kind of a tight build. From here there are 2 options in my mind. You can add in Vitality and Redirection, and have the final slot for some other mod of your choosing. I prefer Transient Fortitude for additional Artemis Bow damage in this setup. Overextended might also be a possibility in that slot if you want to go all in with maximum range for her Quiver abilities. or alternatively, Vitality, Quick Thinking, and Rage to aid in her survivability. Ordinarily, outside of Trinity, I view Quick Thinking as a mod that tends to breed bad habits in exchange for not actually helping that much, but due to Ivara being fragile and having a huge energy pool, and crucially having not one but two ways to render herself invisible if needed, means that a Quick Thinking build actually seems to work quite well. Just make sure to bring a Winds of Purity equipped Furus or Life Strike on your melee weapon to get your health back. Quick Thinking gives you some helpful buffer room, but it's no replacement for being mindful of your situation. Ivara mechanically is, in my opinion, quite possibly the single best designed Warframe to date. She has an extremely wide array of utility powers at her disposal, allowing for stealth, crowd control, and mobility enablers, as well as having her own potential for high damage with her Artemis Bow. Even her invisibility is the most interesting one in the game, as I have already mentioned, thanks to the fact that there is some actual trade-off and cause to be careful with how you move while under the effect of Prowl. Admittedly, she is still quite fragile. This poses a problem in high-level content, particularly in Tower 4 Void missions where all enemies have triple damage, because fuck you. About 30 minutes into Tower 4 survival, when previously things were going just fine, she started getting killed immediately from what I assume were bombard missiles. Though this is perhaps more a problem with the enemy and scenario design rather than Ivara herself. But it does lay down that at high levels, Quick Thinking ends up being pretty important. Either that or stay in Prowl the whole time, which, while it isn't a bad idea, does not particularly make for interesting viewing, which is why I specifically avoided doing so for the sake of this video, but I digress. Ivara is a ton of fun and has a lot going for her. You could probably easily lose a lot of time just playing around with dash wire arrows for that matter. If you enjoy being able to do a whole lot of stuff and know how to keep moving to avoid dying, then I cannot recommend her highly enough. Thank you for watching my look at Ivara. All comments are appreciated and I hope to see you around next time. For other Warframe reviews, feel free to click down below to check out my look at Atlas, or instead check out my thoughts on the Serrata throwing disc not glaive thing. And as always, good luck, have fun, and take care.